Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this Tuesday recap edition of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Besbris, and we are diving right in with at least 5 or 6 names that definitely belong on your rosters from the Tuesday card. First things first, find me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. Oops, I made that too small for YouTubers. There it is. It's DANBESBRIS, Old Man Squad over on Blue Sky. I want to start by jumping straight, and again, we're looking at the Basketball Monster recap page, by jumping straight to a couple of the most interesting spots on the card. And in my eyes, that's probably San Antonio and New Orleans, but we'll actually start with Dallas and the Lakers because the Luka Doncic against his old team game was certainly the thing that ESPN liked to highlight, so we will highlight it as well. It was a good ball game, which I think we all kind of assumed it would be. Kyrie Irving came a little extra motivated. Dallas wanted to kind of prove that they were fine without Luka. It's a friendly thing, but it's always built into these types of matchups. Better defense was going to come out. There was going to be this sort of like a little more oomph, but in a loving way. I don't know if you saw, if any of you guys watched this game live, there was that part late in the game where Kyrie and Jared Vanderbilt started to kind of get in each other's faces. And then all these guys on the Dallas side, led by injured Anthony Davis, came out to be like, come on, get out of here, Jared, because obviously they're old buddies. And that thing de-escalated very quickly. But for Luka, and this is something I talked about on yesterday's show, I didn't think he was going to try to score a billion points against his old team. He took 17 shots, which is a decent number, but it's not an extraordinary one. But you could tell that there was that different emotion around it. From a fantasy perspective, as far as this ball game goes, no real changes on the Lakers side. Rui Hachimura is definitely a guy you're holding on to as the fourth option. Jackson Hayes is your field goal percent and defensive stats streamer / specialist. But you could see in this one, they actually went to a 5-out offense a little bit more often. Extra Dorian Finney-Smith, very little Jared Vanderbilt, who was actually relatively useful. He had a couple of 3-pointers. But they wanted to try to pull any Mavs bigs away from the bucket. So no real changes on the Lakers side. Dallas side, Dante Exum took a LeBron shot to the midsection. It was nothing crazy, but that's why he ended up leaving the ball game, kind of catching his wind. Kyrie's a play. PJ Washington had a horrible shooting game, but he's a play. He still had 10 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, and 4 blocks, despite going 0 for 9. Max Christie is definitely a play. And then we had a big game from Klay Thompson, which this happens. He seems to get himself a little bit more motivated, elevated in those key moments. I'm not big into Klay, haven't really been all season long, but for those stretches when Kyrie and Luka were both out for Dallas. Now, in Klay's defense, he does have 12 threes over his last 3 ball games. He skipped one in there, but he actually had 10 in the 2 games prior to that. So he's on a pretty good 3-point shooting barrage right now, but he just does nothing else these days. Like the fact that he has 5 steals in his last 3 games is an extraordinary accomplishment because on the year he's at 0.8 per game. He's not blocking shots. He doesn't get to the free throw line, so he can't really exercise his advantage there. So what is Klay anymore? Not much. And, if he keeps this up, that's fine. In my eyes, Klay is a 3-point streamer and nothing else. Friends, this show is brought to you by our buddies at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. They've got the largest selection of odds on everything, including the NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, baseball's coming up. They'll have college and pro football when that rolls back around. You got props. You got live betting opportunities on the biggest ball games. So from every 3-pointer to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more on each game, each play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Let's go back to the front of the card from yesterday, as opposed to just going to sort of the big game, the one that ESPN wanted us all to pay attention to. The first few games didn't have a whole lot from the fantasy standpoint. Derek White has come storming back out of the All-Star break, and it's looking more and more like he was just sort of gassed going into the break. Remember, he fell from being like a top 25 guy to being in the 40s, and we called him a buy low. He's back up to number 36 now. So Derek White back to being a third rounder just another really good year. Sam Hauser filled in here for Drew Holiday. He was fine, just a 3-point play if you're looking for that sort of, if you're into that sort of thing. The centers were all basically out for this one. No Porzingis, no Al Horford, no Luke Cornett. No problem, as it turns out. But keep an eye on for the Celtics. This is the back end of a back-to-back happening tonight in Detroit. They knew that was going to be the tougher game. I would assume that at least one, probably two of those centers are back, and you can make a streaming call on that potentially. For Toronto, we had a rare Grady Dick decent game when Barnes, Barrett, and Quickly are all healthy. Don't overread that. I'm hoping that we get Jakob Poeltl back as soon as tonight. He's been questionable for the last couple of ball games. That's about a 3 or 4 day span, which feels like it means he's very close. I don't think they wanted to play him or had any intention of playing him in both halves of the back-to-back. So maybe you get him in on the tail end of it here. We'll see in the next little bit. If he's in, try to get a feel for the minutes cap he might be on. Go from there. Cleveland decimated Orlando. This game was over very, very early. So if you had a Cavalier who had a good fantasy game, just consider yourself very lucky because most of them didn't play enough to put up big numbers. Max Strus had a pretty good game. Darius Garland's out, so Ty Jerome is he's been the fill-in anytime that Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland's missed a game this year. He and Strus, I guess, kind of had the most effective games here. Make of it what you want to. Ty Jerome is a stream right now. Strus is a little bit more of a borderline stream. I think Jerome you could stream in almost every format. Strus, I probably have the confidence to call a head-to-head play while Garland is out, but we don't really know how long it's going to be, and the Cavs have a bad schedule to start the week. They're off for 2 days right now, so it's hard to say anything you should be doing with Cleveland today specifically. And then the other stuff you can pretty much ignore and move on to the next one. Same general idea on the Orlando side, although Cole Anthony got hurt, hyperextended his knee. He's expected to miss at least a week. We'll see about actual timing on that. And I don't know where they go because Jalen Suggs has vanished into the abyss. He's just been gone for weeks with no real update. But that's obviously the other guy that you want to have here going. Otherwise, Franz and Paolo are kind of the only magic you can trust night to night. Wendell Carter Jr. is playing more than Goga Bitadze these days, but his fantasy game is not very good. And there's not enough usage out there to warrant a KCP look. So it's really just a two-horse team right now. And that is boring. And boring is bad. Phoenix and Memphis played a near 300-point overtime game. Bradley Beal back in the starting five has looked very, very, very good. He is invigorated as the Suns make a last-ditch effort to try to save their season, which, spoiler alert, it's not going very well. They're 2.5 games behind the Kings now for that 10 spot. Do you even really want it? Should we be worried about shutdowns? Not yet. There really isn't a whole lot for the Suns to do. They've traded away every pick they have for the next full 2-3 decades. So we just see what we've got here. Now, in a game like this where a team scores 150 points, there are going to be a lot of positive fantasy lines, and we have to try to sift through and figure out what's real. Now, obviously, Beal and Durant and Booker are going to put up big numbers. Those are the big guys. Beal, by the way, is a second rounder since they moved him back into the starting five, so that's cool. Obviously, those three, you just push them off to the side. The questions for this team, Bol, who got back in there and started again, shrug. I don't really know what the hell the Suns are doing night to night. I'll be perfectly honest with you guys. That could be anybody. That could be Royce O'Neal. That could be Grayson Allen. That could be Tyus Jones. That could be Mason Plumlee, who played 33.5 minutes yesterday. It could be Nick Richards. We really don't know game to game. It looked like Bol had his run and then was gone. And then all of a sudden, here he is again, right smack in the mid-game of a 5-7 stretch for the Suns, where I'm sure they'd love to win one eventually. They've got the Pelicans back-to-back Thursday, Friday of this week. So we don't have to do anything today. But, this puts us in a tough spot because if Bol is going to get, and this would have been, well, I don't know that you can guarantee 31, 32 minutes a game, but even in the mid to high 20s, if he gets to that range, he's a fantasy superstar. He has an extraordinarily fantasy-friendly game, even if from a reality standpoint, he's not that great at just being an NBA-level basketball player. His game translates extremely well to 9-cat. So I'm tempted to say you kind of have to call him the definition, Bol, of a speculative ad. He's had 23 and 8 with 2 blocks and 2 threes on good percentages yesterday. But that's what he does when he plays 30 minutes. He's a top 40 fantasy player when he gets starters minutes. There are a lot of guys in the NBA getting starters minutes that aren't anywhere near that. What are the odds this sticks? I don't know. Maybe not great. They did hang in there pretty good with a Memphis team that's good at basketball. Do they give Bol another run at it? Or is it just going to be purely matchup based? Is it going to be back to Royce O'Neal in the next one? Grayson Allen had 21 off the bench, but again, we can't rely on that. His minutes are all over the map. Plumlee's minutes are all over the map. Richards, Jones, Royce, all these guys, their minutes are all over the map. The one guy in this mix where you're like, yeah, but is Bol. Because when Royce O'Neal plays starters minutes, sometimes he's top 75 and sometimes he's 160. Grayson Allen getting starters minutes would be a guarantee, but though we've seen it, maybe I should change the threshold. Bol only really needs 24, 25 minutes to be successful. All of these other guys need 30. You could maybe make the argument that Grayson Allen can get it done in like 27 minutes a game, but pretty much all these other guys need 30. So here we are again, staring down the Bol question mark, which is really none of us truly knows. We don't really know what the hell Bol's about to be. Because he played 33, 30, and 33 minutes, and then he played 10, 13, and 7, and now back to 32. It's the ultimate shrug emoji in all of fantasy basketball, but if you got a spot, you got to call him a spec ad and see what happens. Grizzlies, Santi Aldama has cranked it up a little bit here. He's been one of those guys that I think I'd called him someone you should almost definitely be starting in head-to-head, but someone I'm having trouble starting in roto formats because of the inconsistencies. Last 3 games, he's become more consistent. 31, 29, and 32 minutes. The rebounds are higher. The defensive stats are better. The scoring is about the same, give or take. And, he's not 100% rostered because he had that long down period. So, Santi was already a head-to-head start. I think with the minutes being a little more crystallized lately, that you can probably call him a roto start as well. Although, bear in mind, in this ball game, Jaren Jackson fouled out in about 32 minutes. So there were a few extra power forward minutes floating around where, on a normal night, this might have been a 26-minute game for Santi or something like that. But he does belong on most rosters, definitely all head-to-head, and many roto rosters. But I understand if you don't have the gall, the stones to start him against a games cap, because lately I haven't either. Jalen Wells, former Sonoma State Seawolf, had 19 points, but you're not doing anything about that. And then, everybody else is schedule play only. Houston beat Milwaukee. That was a good one. Defensive battle. Amen Thompson got ejected for a flagrant 2. And the Rockets, this is a good win for Houston because they didn't get Freddie VanVleet back for this ball game. I think there's some hope that he'll play tonight. Second half of a back-to-back. They've got San Antonio, so a little bit more of a cushion, sort of a soft fall, as it were. For Milwaukee, you're just going Brook Lopez, Giannis, and Dame in 9-cat. Someone was trying to convince me that I need to be a little bit higher on Kuzma. I'm not. He's not. He's a bad 9-category fantasy player. Has been for years. Points leagues, you can give Kuzma a look. Category leagues, no. Dylan Brooks had his, he'll do it probably again in the next ball game. He has about 2 games every month where you're like, ooh, and then you remember that he's Dylan Brooks. Amen Thompson is a sell high. He's going to be great, probably the rest of the way, but he's a sell high because he's just going to have a little bit less to do each time a guy comes back. Not a lot of it less, a little bit less. Tari Easton's going to sit out the back-to-back, so that'll make sure that there's plenty of available stuff. So you have a little bit of a time window if you want to pull that one off. but this is probably your last chance. I think Van Vliet, I think he's back tonight, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm trying to do a better job of this. Basically, around the 15-minute mark of every show I do, I want to remind you all to please like the video, subscribe to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, especially this time of year. If you're finding us for the first time or if you've been watching us and just kind of checking in daily, hit that subscribe button. It's actually a really big deal. It helps us grow faster because YouTube's like, oh, this is a thing that we need to be showing to other people. So take that moment. Also, shout out to everybody lately that has been dropping those 5-star reviews on Spotify and iTunes. If you have an opportunity to do that yourself, I'd really, really appreciate it. It's big, not right now, but for actually going into next year when we're working on growing the traditional podcast feeds as well. Having all those positive reviews helps it move, again, kind of into the search board. So thank you guys for doing those. You've been great so far. Let's keep it going. Like, rate, subscribe. Let's keep talking about whatever the hell we were talking about a minute ago. San Antonio, New Orleans. From a fantasy standpoint, this might have been the most interesting game on the docket because as you guys heard me talking about on recent shows and with Adam King, he and I did a mailbag show. Devin Vassell was a name that came up a lot in what should we do. And Adam and I both said hold because he was shooting like 22% at a bunch of blowout losses. His shooting didn't really come around in this ballgame, by the way, but he did more. And at some point, he's going to both do more and the shooting's coming around. And if you looked at this one and you were like, oh, Devin Vassell, 20 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, is stealing a couple of threes. All right, now we're getting it in gear. This is just a taste of what Devin Vassell can do when he's got usage, which he should be getting here, basically from this point to the end of the season, and then starts to make some buckets. So your holds on the Spurs are Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, and De'Aaron Fox. Jeremy Sohan, schedule play. Harrison Barnes, schedule play. Keldon Johnson, schedule play. Bismack Biyombo, rebounds specialist play only with a punt free throw tilt. And the Pelicans, you're starting to see a little bit of a changing of the guard there, although we'll have to wait and find out what the end result of all of this is. By the way, shout out Pelicans for winning 2 games in a row and now moving out of the bottom 3 in worst records in the NBA. Don't screw this up, Pels. You've had a season from hell. Don't accidentally win a few games down the stretch and muck it up. Right now, Zion is still playing. Trey Murphy is still playing. CJ McCollum is still playing. Those are the 3 guys where you point and you're like, is there fear of a shutdown? And for me, the answer is sorta. McCollum strikes me as the most likely to be shut down because he's the old guy in that mix. And, Zion is not old. And if you're like, oh, Zion, like they got to shut him down and get his body right. He's already missed most of the season. And Trey Murphy's a young dude. He missed a bunch of games right at the start of the year, but he's been rolling since then at a ridiculously high clip. So I think those guys, Trey probably plays until the last couple of weeks. Zion probably plays until the last couple of weeks, even if it's at sort of like a, 70% clip or whatever. McCollum is the one where I'd be like, well, do they start to give him the back-to-backs off? It's a possibility. Let's keep an eye on that because the Pels have a back-to-back in Phoenix, 2 games, same place, tomorrow and Friday. So we'll get some data on that. If nothing changes, fine. That's also okay. Yves Missy, to me, is a punt free throw ad. He made his free throws in this ball game, but one game doth not a free throw shooter make. Kelly Olynyk, you guys know I love me some Kelly Olynyk. I'm hoping that the minutes trend up just a little bit more from 23. He can do it in 23 minutes when he's on a team where the ball is going to be in his hands a little bit, and you're seeing Olynyk as like the lone rebounder out there. And he's also a very good passer for a big man. So 23 minutes is enough to get him near 3 assists a day. But I really want to see him get up to 25, 26, 27. That's when you can really start to make a difference if you're Kelly Olynyk. That's when you start to see double-digit scoring and 4 or 5 assists, and sometimes you get to steal and a block. But 23, you're probably not going to get all of that. So for Kelly, it's about the 9-cat translatable fantasy game. So he's an ad for me. Alvarado is a hold. I know he wasn't as good in this one. Bruce Brown saw some bonus playing time. He was just better in this particular matchup, and the Pels are still attempting to win games. Although Brown and Alvarado were part of a couple of lineups that did well. So it was kind of a goofball. Jordan Hawkins also had a little bit of extra playing time. It was a screwy day. Karlo Matkovic, by the way, not a guy you're playing on days when Zion is in there. So hold on Alvarado. Olynyk and Missy, I think, are ads in different formats. Bruce Brown is a watch list guy right now, or you could schedule play him if you really wanted to. And that's where I sit on the Pelicans. We already talked Lakers Mavs. Let's talk about the embarrassment that is the Charlotte Hornets. Their last few games, and shout out, by the way, to the Hornets for coming out of the All-Star break and surprising the Lakers, who were just not even at all ready for that ball game. But since then, the Hornets have lost by 14, 53, 42, and now 36. What's the margin on that? 53 plus 42 is 95, plus 36 is 131. So they've lost their last 3 games by 131 combined points. Did I do that math quickly in my head right? I don't know. Someone posed the question to me on Twitter as I was complaining about a Hornets game. Are they worse than the process 76ers? I think the answer is no. But in this game, no LaMelo Ball, and obviously Brandon Miller's out for the year. This particular Hornets lineup might be about as bad as the process 76ers. They've still got Miles Bridges, and they've still got Mark Williams, who you can start in these games. But, man, this team is bad. From a fantasy standpoint, you know what you're getting, though. LaMelo Ball is going to play in every game besides the back-to-backs, and probably they'll just play him down the stretch at this point because they're terrible regardless. Hornets have the 3rd worst record in the NBA. They're tied with the Jazz. Actually tied with the Jazz for 2nd worst, but it's numbers 2 and 3. They do need to make sure they lose games at a better clip than the Pelicans, so they're going to keep giving guys days off. Mark Williams is also going to sit half of every back-to-back. Nurk, it looks like, might also sit half of back-to-backs, but that might mean that he gets more minutes in the one he's not. So it might be like a Mark Williams goes in one day of the back-to-back with Diabate playing 20 backup minutes, and Nurk goes in the other with Diabate playing 20 backup minutes. So that makes kind of all 3 of those guys really hard to roster in unlimited games leagues. You're going to hold Mark Williams, obviously, because he can do a lot of damage on the games he plays. It's really hard to make a case to hold the other guys if they're going to be sitting out basically 1 out of every 4 games. Except for Diabate, who it sounds like now is just a permanent backup, so that makes him hard to hold. Mark Williams and Yusuf Nurkic, I think, both belong on games cap rosters, and then you can just deploy them when the time is right. Although, if I remember Charlotte's schedule, and I can pull it up real quick here, I think they just finished up a stretch where they had a whole bunch of games in a row. Yeah, this was it. That was game 5 in 7 days. And now they have 4 games over 9 days, and then another back-to-back, and then they don't have another back-to-back until March 20th. So there's some long stretches in there where you might actually get Mark Williams being useful and Nurk as the backup. And in that case, I don't know that you need to have Nurk on your fantasy team. Ugh. People keep asking me if you can drop Nick Smith. I never told you to add Nick Smith. This is a weird little, and I understand why it happens because there are a lot of fantasy analysts, but like it's one of the only things that still annoys me a little bit. And I know I should just get over it because I'm a big boy and I need to just stop being a little whiny baby. But when you guys ask me if you should drop a player that I already said I don't want on my roster, it tells me you're not listening. And that's like my one pet peeve. If you're going to listen to my stuff, listen to my stuff. You don't have to do everything I say, but if you do the opposite, don't come back to me later and say, should I undo this thing? I mean, you know my answer. Like, Nick Smith is not a good fantasy player. He's not a good basketball player by NBA standards. By world standards, he's obviously very, very good. So don't ask me about Nick Smith Jr. I have not one time said add him other than the one game where everybody was out. And I was like, well, Nick Smith's going to have to take 16 shots. You can go try to get, 17 points and 2 3-pointers. By the way, Wendell Moore Jr., not to be confused with Wendell Carter Jr., had a double-double, and if a tree falls in the forest and all that kind of stuff. Boy, Draymond Green sure is locked in all of a sudden. It is amazing what feeling like you're competitive can do to a player's juices. Draymond is a completely changed man over the last Jimmy Butler. Draymond is up to number 122 on the season, but he wasn't close to that for a long time. All of a sudden now, basically since the trade deadline, he's a top 50 play. We got awake Draymond again. So obviously play him, Steph, play him, Butler, play him. And this game was over very, very, very early. We had a couple of games yesterday that ended by halftime. Brandon Pajemski is a hold. Moses Moody is a borderline hold, mostly a three-pointers play, but a relatively reliable one right now. So, I don't know. Would you rather have Moses Moody or Klay Thompson? You're pretty much going to get the same thing out of either one of them, fantasy-wise. Or neither. Also a viable option. Well. Hey guys. Why not come hang out with us over at underdogfantasy.com? And before you do that, again, a reminder to please subscribe and like the channel. If you made it to this part of the show, I think you kind of have to subscribe. I think that's the rule. I didn't make it up. I just follow it. Underdogfantasy.com. We did hit our play yesterday. As you guys recall, I was kind of kicking between a few different options. Let's go to Dano's results page. You can see how it's gone a little bit up and down. But we've had a couple of wins in a row. This one was refunded. So it's been a pretty good run for me. Refunded because a player was scratched. This one was refunded because it was a no-sweat play on a hockey match. What do I know about hockey? This is the only one we lost here, was the Ball and Hayes pick, whenever the hell day that was. So lately, things have been going well. And in this one, I ultimately did figure out how to use the freebie. Basically, they put a freebie in there for Austin Reeves. All he had to do was score a single point. He obviously scored 20, so that was fine. Kelly Olynyk was the other one I ended up going with, higher than 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists. And the reason we did all the way across the board is because you never know if Olynyk's going to score, but you always know he's going to be getting boards and assists when he's out there. And so you just kind of roll it all together. Bismack Biyombo over, I think it was like 12.5 or 13.5 was the other one I almost put on the card to make it a 3-burger, and I should have, because he ended up with 22 points, rebound. 23 if you want points, rebounds, and assists on Biyombo. So, yeah, I left a little cash on the table, but a win is a win, and I feel good about that. So join us today as we screw around over at UnderdogFantasy.com using promo code OLDMAN, OLDMAN. When you sign up, unlock up to $1,000 in bonus cash on your first deposit and a free play. The one that came up yesterday was just happenstance. You get one for free just by signing up, and then other ones pop up throughout the calendar year, and we're obviously going to use those as they surface. There are none right now, as you can see for me, because I used it yesterday. But again, sign up immediately. That way you get access to it. I think the smartest thing to do actually is to sign up. You can use the link in the show description if that's easier for you. Although it sounds like if you're on mobile, that takes you to a download screen, so you might need to download it and then click the link again to make sure that the promo code is in there. Just, make sure it's locked in. Maybe play a few games for $1 just to get your feet wet. And once you figure out how you like to operate, then you use your promos, which is what I should have done, because I used them right out of the gate and I blew it and I didn't really know what I was doing yet. Now, you guys might remember, if you've been watching me, I'm back to where I started. I lost a quarter of what I had in there, and I've been building it back up here over the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, I should have waited. I should have played much smaller. I think I put in a couple of $10 ones right at the beginning, and I blew them. And now it's, a few bucks at a time. We're slowly building that bankroll. What do we like going on today? It's kind of a medium-sized card, so there are a lot of options out there. We already hit on some San Antonio stuff. I don't know if we want to go back to the well with the Spurs. I think Devin Vassell is in a really good place right now, but the Rockets defensively are really tough, so that's maybe a spot where you shy away from them. Do we want to go back to the well with Bismack again, or is that too dicey? We'll have to think about that one. Sacramento, Utah, can't do anything in that ball game until we know if the Jazz are running their JV or their varsity squad. Clippers and Bulls, we know, Kawhi has a line listed, but, no, he's questionable for this game. Norman Powell's the guy who's already out. Not much that I want to do there. Josh Giddey's been running super hot lately. Lonzo, Ben Simmons, Matas Bacelis. Io's out. I don't know why he's in that thing. I think Kawhi's out also. Chris Dunn. I mean, is there a steals prop on Chris Dunn? 1.5 steals? Oof, boy. We think he can get 2 again? All right, let's throw a Chris Dunn steals play in there. I'm not locked in on that. I'm going to use it as a placeholder for a minute. OKC, Brooklyn, Portland, Washington. This is intriguing. Washington is a team that everybody gets going against. I kind of want to do something with the Blazers, but what's it going to be? Maybe Donovan Clingan? It was a rebounds prop, 10.5 boards for Donovan. I think I like the higher on his boards. Kind of want to do a bunch of things for the Blazers, but maybe not. What about Chris Middleton? We saw that up above. 13.5 points, 21. I mean, he's just not going to play that many minutes. Man. 4.5 assists. Yeah, I don't know. Boston, Detroit, that should be a fun one, but I don't know about making plays on it. And Toronto, Indiana, Philly, New York, Jalen Brunson, Paul George, Cat, OG, Tyrese Maxey, Mikal Bridges. There's a Quentin Grimes prop. Maybe we'll go higher on Grimes. I think he's going to play the whole game this time around. Can Philly stay competitive? I don't know. Or Kelly Oubre, point, rebound, assist prop. I don't like the PRA for Quentin Grimes. That's asking too many rebounds and assists out of him. All right, I'm looking at Grimes higher also. Hires, too many hires on my card. So public, Dan. All right, well, I haven't locked this in yet. I'll probably pick 2 of these 3, a Dunn steals play, a Clingan rebounds play, and a Grimes scoring play. I think the one I'm least confident in is the Dunn steals play. He's on such a furious run right now, though. Feels like 1.5 steals should be pretty easy, but also steals are weird. With Clingan, you're just saying, can he play like 23, 24 minutes? Because if he does, he's going to get 10.5 rebounds. And then with Grimes, there should be enough shots. Knicks play a fast pace. I think the Dunn pick here is probably the one that comes off the board, but we'll wait and see. I'll try to lock it in a little bit later. Anyway, come play with us. It's always fun. We can build a little bankroll together. Have a good time. UnderdogFantasy.com. Thanks to BetOnline as well. I'm Dan Besbris. Find me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. But most importantly, hit that subscribe button on your way out, no matter how you're taking in the content. I think this will be our only show in the midday today. We might have one that drops later on tonight, but I figured, the show I did with Kingy dropped late last night. So that one and this one together should sort of tide you guys over for the day. Enjoy the action. Set those lineups. Again, a reminder, next week we start our streaming shows every day, 10 to 15-minute quick hitters, players to pick up. There was a request to try to do a day in advance as well. So we'll try to take, 2 or 3 minutes at the end of the show to kind of look ahead. But that's harder because you don't know who's going to be healthy 24 hours in advance, especially as you get into the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season and you get all those late scratches. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad. I got to get out of here. I got a busy day coming up. See you soon.